Friends, I welcome you to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It is not difficult for you, but it is pleasant for me. And we're starting. Characters. Adrian Austin, 35 years old, father of 3 children, married to Dallas for 13 years. Vice President of Operations at Arlington Industries. Dallas Austin, 33 years old, married to Adrian, mother of 3 children and a housewife. Brian Brain Austin, 11 years old, the eldest child of Adrian and Dallas. He passed the IQ test 149 and enrolled in the GATE program, Education for Gifted and Talented People. His parents want to send him to a prestigious private school. Whitney Whit Austin, 10 years old, eldest daughter, very smart and introspective, wants to become a writer. Victoria Vicky Austin, 9 years old, a serious daddy's daughter. Houston Plano, 23 years old, successful carpet salesman and gym lover. NSH Dixon, he's a family lawyer and reality show host. Garland Austin, 42 years old, Adrian's older brother. Colleen Killy Austin, age 43, married to Garland for 15 years, 2 teenagers at home. History. Adrian Austin was on top of the world. At the age of 35, he became Vice President of Operations at Arlington Industries, AI. In the entire century-long history of the company, none of such young people has achieved the status of Vice President. Everyone assumed that within 10 years he would become CEO when Bill Travis retired. Adrian had everything: a basic income reaching 6 figures, with huge potential for annual bonuses, a company car, BMW 7 Series, an expense account, and many other benefits and advantages. He was loved and respected throughout the organization. If you were on his team, then you had great success in AI. If Adrian had been honest, he would probably have said that he was not sure that he was loved. He knew that people kissed his ass and worshipped him to advance their own plans. But isn't that how the workplace works? In any case, he was rewarded for his work, not for his personality, so he wasn't too concerned about this aspect of corporate life. As he drove 45 minutes home after another long working Mondays were always long, his thoughts shifted from work to family. His family is what made all his hard work worthwhile. He and his wife Dallas met when he was in college. They had a whirlwind romance, and after graduating from college, they got married. Dallas did not graduate from college. She always told him that she studied only to please her father. In fact, Dallas wanted to have a family. She wanted to be a mother more than anything in the world, and Adrian admitted that she was damn good at it too. Dallas was a little demanding in the family, but with 3 bright and active children, she had to be like that. Adrian always joked that she had better organizational skills than he did. Adrian had mixed feelings about Dallas becoming a full-time mother. On the one hand, he was delighted that the children would have the opportunity that their mother gives them full-time. But he always wondered if Dallas would regret not graduating from college at some point and pursuing a career outside the home and children. She was very smart and sociable. She was well-read and could have a conversation on many topics. He was proud of her, but he was afraid that one day it would not be enough for her. Adrian's outstanding work ethic allowed Dallas to become a full-time mother of their children. It also provided his family with a very comfortable lifestyle. They lived in a big house in the best neighborhood with the best schools. They had some money in the bank, but at the same time, they had a large mortgage, huge payments for a Dallas Land Rover car, gym fees for both, numerous expensive toys and expenses related to children, and, of course, participation in an exclusive country club. In his position, it was very important to be seen in the right places and with the right people. A large savings account will have to wait. He didn't worry about it. He knew that a much higher income awaited him in the future. The 2 10-day family trips they took each year also significantly undermined their finances. Every Christmas vacation, the whole family went to a warm place. Last year it was Hawaii. Every summer they went to national parks like Yellowstone or the Grand Canyon. They had already visited Disneyland, but this summer something else was waiting for them. They were going to Europe. What's the point of having money if you don't enjoy it, right? And finally, Dallas, unlike many full-time moms, somehow found the time and energy for a very busy bed life with Adrian. She was aggressive, funny, curious, and almost insatiable in bed. As Adrian Austin pulled into his long concrete flag driveway, He felt that he was indeed a very lucky man. When he returned home this Monday evening, everything seemed normal. As usual, shortly after he walked through the door, Dallas greeted him with her usual welcoming kiss. Then Dallas told him she wanted to have an adult conversation. It would be a wake-up call for someone, but not for Adrian. Dallas often demanded these adult conversations because, according to her, after she spent the whole day messing with the lives and problems of children, she periodically needed mental stimulation, which was provided by adult communication. Sometimes they went out to dinner together, and sometimes with friends, of whom they had a lot. "Oh, great. What would you like to do? Let me arrange something. It'll be just the two of us, or definitely, it will be just the two of us, and instead of going somewhere, I think we should just talk at home. Dinner is almost ready. I sent the children to spend the night with my parents, so no one will disturb us." "Fine. I'll go change and come right down." Adrian thought it was unusual, but it wasn't really that far from the ordinary. Dallas's parents loved to look after the children. Since they were both retired, they had no problem leaving the children overnight and taking them to school in the morning. Recently, Dallas even asked them to pick up the children from school and help with homework, and then return them to the house. Everyone seemed to enjoy this routine. Taking a shower and changing clothes, Adrian once again remembered how lucky he was. He thought with regret that in the modern world, mothers who stay at home are looked down upon. Adrian felt a general sadness at how such women are underestimated in society. During dinner, Adrian suggested that Dallas wanted to talk about his desire to go back to college or find a job. He hoped that was the case, because he loved his wife and wanted the best for her. He firmly believed in the old proverb, "A happy wife is a happy life." Dallas was usually very talkative and cheerful during their meals together, but now she was quiet and seemed nervous. Dallas seemed to be stalling for time. She started talking about children, which was extremely unusual for these adult conversations. At first, she settled on Brian, whom they regularly called Brain, a play on words brain, because he was very smart. "Well, honey, will you get a promotion and we can get the Brain into an Ivy League school?" "Well, since he's only 11 and he won't go to college for 7 years, then yes, I think it will happen by then." He laughed at her penchant for planning the future. Their daughters Whitney and Victoria were 10 and 9 years old, respectively. When Dallas started discussing their future, Adrian became worried. It was so unusual. She was obviously lying. "Dallas, what's going on? Is talking about our children really what you have in mind?" She let out a long sigh. "No, honey, it's not like that. I want to discuss the significant changes in our life together. It's going to be hard for you, and well, I want you to understand how important this is to me, so that you can accept that our lives will remain unchanged." Sorry to interrupt you, sweetheart, but how can our lives change significantly and still remain the same?" Adrian was genuinely puzzled. Adrian had already correctly assumed that change was coming before Dallas mentioned it. Looking back, he was half right. Dallas wanted a change, but the changes she had in mind had nothing to do with starting a job or going back to college. Adrian sat with his mouth open, stunned. He was unable to speak. He must have misheard her words. It was impossible. Compared to his amazement, the cliché of an ignorant husband looked almost prescient. Finally, he was able to come up with some coherent sentences. "So, let me check if I understand everything correctly. You had an affair." Dallas began to interrupt. "Oh, yes, you had an additional relationship outside of our marriage for a few weeks with someone 10 years younger than you. And you would like to bring me up to date on these changes in our lives? Because, well, honey, it's because I love you so much. I just couldn't keep it from you in good conscience. It doesn't take anything away from what we have. But I started to have feelings for him. But you don't have to worry. My feelings for him are not like our mutual love. Since my relationship with Houston will continue for some time, I felt it necessary to discuss this with you." Adrian's shock and confusion quickly turned to rage. He was desperately trying to regain control of himself before he did something incredibly stupid. "I see." He almost spat out. "You're acting like I should be happy for you." "Well, it would be great if you did, but I guess that's too much to ask. I hope that you will understand how little this means and eventually come to terms with it." "You're crazy." "Stop it," he shouted. "I'm not going to." Adrian started to move towards Dallas, but caught himself and took a deep breath. Dallas, there's no way I'm going to put up with this. The very fact that you've been cheating on me for the last few weeks is ruining our marriage. Adrian started hyperventilating, so he sat down and took a few deep breaths, trying to calm down. Dallas, the only solution I see is a divorce. No, we're not getting divorced, period. A divorce would be bad for everyone, especially our children, Adrian. You need to think about how this will affect your relationship with them. So please calm down, and let's talk rationally about how to arrange everything. To be honest, Dallas, divorce is the only possible option that I see. Listen to me, honey. I know it looks bleak from your point of view, but do me a favor and don't do anything rash. Can you at least think of other possible alternatives? Let's say before the end of the week, and then we can discuss how to move forward. If not for me, then for our children, please? Okay, Dallas, I'm going to stay somewhere else for a few days, and I promise not to do anything until we talk again. But I have to be honest. I don't see any other way out but divorce. I'm just not going to live the lifestyle you're suggesting. I just won't. At the very least, Adrian could have used this time to create calmer and more convincing arguments than the ones he was making now. It will also give him the opportunity to talk to Dallas' parents. Maybe they can talk some sense into her. Adrian quickly packed his overnight bag. Dallas looked strangely calm and detached. Leaning against the doorjamb of their bedroom and casually folding her arms, she watched him pack his things. Tell the children that I had to leave the city urgently for a couple of days on business. Dallas calmly followed him to the door. He went out onto the porch and turned to face her again. Dallas, please don't do this to our family. It's not too late, please. Adrian knew he sounded whiny and weak, but to be honest, that's exactly how he felt at the moment. Adrian, darling, I know that everything will work out, you'll see. Everything will be fine. An unreadable expression appeared on her face that Adrian hadn't seen before, and she slowly closed the door behind him, shaking her head. Did Adrian think she looked a little annoyed and bored? No, it was more like the look she sometimes gave the children when they couldn't immediately grasp the simple truth. She was in charge, and in the end, they had to obey her will. That look sent a shiver down his spine. He headed to the Hilton across the street from his office. At least now he had time to think. Adrian was 20 minutes late to the office this morning, and this is despite the fact that he was just across the street. Adrian was usually in the office until 8, but it was a small miracle that he got there at all, so he wasn't too upset about being late. When he passed the office manager's desk, she jumped up to greet him. "Mr. Austin, you're late today." This gentleman was waiting. She pointed to a man he didn't recognize and smiled and walked over to him. "Mr. Adrian Austin, you are being served." In one practiced motion, he handed Adrian a thick envelope measuring 8.5 by 11 inches, 21.6 by 28 centimeters, and photographed it. "In addition, sir, there is a restraining order prohibiting you from contacting your wife and 3 children. I kindly ask you to familiarize yourself with the details, which state that you must be at least 300 feet, 100 meters, away from your home, the school where the children study, and the place of residence of your relatives. I strongly recommend that you seek the services of a lawyer immediately. Good luck." And he disappeared as quickly as he appeared. Before he could react to the shock, he saw 3 uniformed policemen who were purposefully approaching him. "Mr. Adrian Austin?" He could only nod his head. "You are under arrest for spousal battery. You are also accused of beating your minor children. Turn around and put your hands behind your back, please, while I give you Miranda's recommendations." "You have the right." Adrian listened as the officer continued to speak, but then it dawned on him that Dallas had planned everything in advance. Everything was done long before yesterday's conversation. As usual, Dallas was 3 steps ahead of him. She knew exactly how he would react, and she lied to his face anyway. His emotions were very diverse, but the main ones were rage and confusion. The arrest and placement in a cell turned out to be the most humiliating in his life. Adrian was handcuffed and led through the entire office building. At least, that's what he thought. His colleagues' expressions were mostly shocked, but he could have sworn he saw a few smirks of detractors among them. Things got even worse while he was going through the registration procedure at the local police station. After that, he was allowed to make 2 phone calls. The first one is to the office of a corporate lawyer at work. When he asked for advice, the lead lawyer told him that they could not represent him because of a conflict of interest. What the hell does that mean? All he needed was a recommendation from a family law lawyer. The call was unceremoniously interrupted. Adrian thought hard about his situation. He wasn't a stupid person. At least, that's what he thought until yesterday. He called an old college friend who turned out to be an experienced family lawyer and a celebrity of his kind. When he finally got through to Ennis H. Dixon, ESQ, then told about his predicament, Ennis, as he was called, informed him not to talk to anyone about his situation, especially the police. EH told him that if he did otherwise, it would have nothing to do with his case. Okay, I get it. I'll meet you at your office tomorrow, and we can talk about this in more detail. EH burst into a fit of bubbling laughter. Finally, he calmed down and solemnly said, Adrian, my friend, there are 2 points. First of all, you're fucked up, and you're going to be in jail for quite a long time. Someone has carefully prepared your wife, and if I'm not mistaken in my guesses, you're broke at the moment. Her lawyer probably froze all your assets. So what's that MasterCard black card you have? Well, right now it's probably only good as a shoehorn. And secondly, you are accused of one of the few crimes in America where you are guilty until you prove your innocence. Yes, sir. You're in complete shit. However, if you're telling me the truth and you didn't do what you're accused of, I'll eventually get you off the criminal charges. But as for the divorce, you don't have the slightest chance of coming out of it in any other condition than being raped and with arterial bleeding from numerous open wounds. But none of this matters, Adrian. Just keep your mouth shut, and eventually I'll get you out of there. H was right. He was broke. The next day, when he was charged because he did not pose a particular danger to escape, bail was set at $50,000. That meant he only needed $5,000 to get out on bail. It might as well have been $5 million, because he didn't have 2 nickels to rake in. He spent more than 30 days in prison. In the end, Adrian's brother, who was a loser, was able to raise money for him. Garland Austin was 7 years older than Adrian. Garland wasn't really a loser. He was just a truck driver and lived on the other side of town. The distance between them was only a few miles, but economically it was much further than Adrian's usual lifestyle. They just didn't have much in common, so they rarely saw each other. Garland was a happy man, married to his wife Colleen for 15 years, and had 3 young teenage children. They met when Killy worked as a waitress at a local restaurant, Denny's, where she still works. They lived in a mobile home in an unremarkable park. Adrian didn't even know if they owned or rented the 1980s semi-detached house they called Home Sweet Home. Adrian felt a sense of shame when Garland invited him to live with his family. Even though he could only offer Adrian a worn-out couch to sleep on, he had no choice but to accept. Adrian knew he should be grateful, but his ignorance about his current situation hadn't subsided yet. When Adrian was finally released from the county jail, he really wanted to take a long, scalding hot shower to wash away his shame and embarrassment. But he had to get to work to seriously fix the situation. Of course, he talked to Bill Travis sometimes, but all he was told was that Adrian should come to him as soon as he was able. The conversation with Mr. Travis was quite short. It looks like Adrian was no longer working in AI. The whole situation was too indecent for them, as you can imagine. However, the AI still cared about Adrian. So much so that they paid him a severance package of $25,000, plus accrued vacation and the opportunity to use his boomer for 30 days. All he had to do was sign a standard confidentiality agreement. Adrian was about to tell Bill Travis to shove him up his pompous ass, but he thought better of it in time. Mr. Travis, how inconspicuous can this package be? I mean, can I get it in cash? Of course, my boy, of course. We're not heartless, you know. They both knew it was a lie, but that fact only now bothered Adrian. They both knew why Adrian wanted the money in cash and understood that he had no choice but to accept it. After all, it was just a business. That's the way their world works. EH turned out to be true to his word and, in the end, was able to get all criminal charges dropped. It wasn't that easy, especially because there was a noticeable bruise on Dallas' right cheek. But Adrian's $25,000 was long gone, and by the time this part of his nightmare was over, he was in a deep hole in front of EH. Although Adrian was learning the lessons, EH had to continue teaching Adrian how the real world works. EH explained that the chances of a snowball in hell is a legal term meaning extremely low probability. Adrian, there is not a single judicial official in the country right now who would have the courage to lift the restraining orders. Just because there was not sufficient evidence to support the charges against you, no judicial official would risk losing his job because of your case. Even if it was only a 1 in a million chance that you would harm your family, the order will remain in force. Adrian was about to say something clever about EH working for him, but remembered that he already owed him 10,000 more than he had on hand. And the problems with the family court were just beginning. And, as EH eloquently explained, the family court didn't care about anything except that Adrian was in bondage for most of the rest of his life. When they argued in court about alimony and child support, EH told him that the court would most likely proceed from his last salary. The judge will not care that he is unemployed, because he will always be able to replace this job with a similar one. And it doesn't matter one iota that because of the notoriety of his business, he will be lucky if he can find a job for half of what he used to earn. He would also have to keep paying for the house, contribute to the college fund if there was one, give 50% of his 401k to Dallas, and so on and so forth. It was a modern version of lynching. Adrian also had to pay for monthly visits with the children under the supervision of the court. It wasn't cheap either, because a child welfare officer had to be present. And so it happened. In less than a year, Adrian Austin has gone from the top of the world to dust. At the end of the final hearing in his divorce case, Dallas jumped up to Adrian. She didn't seem to care about anything in this world. She smiled at him as he stood alone in the hallway outside the courtroom, just as EH had warned. He felt raped, bloodied, and defeated. "Get away from me, Dallas. I have nothing to say to you. Besides, I don't want to violate your restraining order." He literally spat at her. "Oh, honey, don't be like that," she pouted. "It wasn't supposed to be like that, you know? All you had to do was follow the program, and your life wouldn't have changed a bit. Go to hell, Dallas. I'm not stupid. You've planned everything. You knew exactly what my reaction would be." What an expression, Adrian. "Look, everything can still be good for us. I can make it all disappear." She generously waved her hand around the vast courtroom. "All you have to do is apologize to me, and you can go home. But I need your answer right now, because if you say no, Houston will move in with me." She grinned, knowing full well what his answer would be. "Was it worth it, Adrian, to lose everything you held dear for a little lovemaking on the side for me?" Her eyes flashed. Adrian hissed and felt like he wanted to wrap his arms around her throat and squeeze as hard as he could. "Well, Dallas, at least I have self-respect, but what about you?" She laughed arrogantly. "Everything else, darling, everything else." Dallas pushed her blonde hair off her shoulders, turned and left. She didn't stop giggling the whole way, because she knew Adrian would look after her and eventually give in to her desires. Besides, if he doesn't come to his senses soon, she still has a few tricks up her sleeve. Men are like children. 9 years later. It was a sultry August afternoon. It was such a sultry heat when a person could see waves of heat rising from the red-hot concrete sidewalks. The young man and the teenage girl were clearly uncomfortable with their surroundings. Although they were sweating, it wasn't from the heat. They looked around nervously, looking at what was written on a piece of paper and the cheap rusty metal address numbers on the eaves of the house they were standing in front of. It was not easy to distinguish the numbers against the background of faded and peeling paint. It didn't help that one of the numbers was missing, but the shadow of the paint left in its place seemed to match the paper. My God, the brain. Can't it be that he lived here? Up to this point, the biggest shock in Vicky's young life was to find out that her father still lives in the same city as her. She remembered that he had run away from them somewhere far abroad. Brian Brain. Austin just grunted in response. His younger sister Vicky turned 18 today. The fact that they were standing in this place was the culmination of several months of work. Although the area in which they were located could not be called dysfunctional, it definitely reflected the degree of desolation that most people associate with poverty. All the houses were small post-war cottages with 2 or 3 bedrooms. It was a predominantly white, upper-middle-class neighborhood, and, as a rule, the people living in it either ignored each other or occasionally politely waved their hands. In most cases, they didn't even remember the names of their neighbors. It was one of those communities where you couldn't afford to be found dead in a car more than 2 years old so that the neighbors wouldn't think badly of you. One year, if it was a domestic model. However, in the place where they were now, wealthy people had cars from 5 years ago. Brian and Vicky are not used to the diverse demographic they find themselves in. The tumultuous cacophony of neighborhood noises vying with each other for supremacy was also alien to them. Ever since they arrived in this area, their bad feeling about their goal on this threshold has grown exponentially. How can this be, Brain? Vicky's voice clearly expressed her concern. Maybe it was a very bad idea. Let's just go home. No, Vicky, we don't have a choice. This may be your only chance. Besides, I know that Mom told us about what happened. But this, he waved his hand aside, doesn't that make you even more suspicious? I know what causes it. We're going to see this through. But what if he doesn't remember me? Or, even worse, will he remember, but won't want anything to do with me? You know what Mom said. Get off me, Vic. I have a feeling that we have never been told a true story. Yes, but none of us were very nice to him the last time we saw him, you know? Come on, Vic. It's now or never. He snapped back, ignoring her last statement, which he knew was true. This fact greatly increased his anxiety. They moved towards the door. They inhaled and involuntarily held their breath. Brian knocked on a badly warped ancient wooden-framed screen door. The knock echoed loudly because the front door was open behind the screen. He thought that this was not typical for this area. Adrian Austin heard a knock on the door. Oh, who the hell could it be? Every kid in the area is always selling something. But on a Sunday afternoon, he chuckled to himself. He was very well liked in the area. When he first moved in, most of the neighbors thought he looked out of place. But over time, he fit into the team, and Adrian was readily accepted. The neighborhood moms were constantly trying to set him up with various relatives and girlfriends. But Adrian believed that this was a small price to pay for the delicious national food they pampered him with. Most divorced guys lose weight, and he's gained a couple of pounds over the years. The local kids knew that it could be easily sold to him. He had no more money than any other family, but if he had a few extra dollars, he always bought what they were selling so they could go on some kind of field trip or buy badly needed school supplies. The doors are open. He shouted his usual greeting, pressing the off button on the remote control. The baseball game he was almost watching was boring as hell anyway. Damn analysts were messing up the game. Adrian's neighborhood might be low income, but everyone knew each other and looked out for each other. The norm was to enter immediately after knocking. The neighbors living right on either side of him didn't even bother to knock. After waiting a minute, he realized that no one was coming in. Curious, he slowly got up from his dilapidated chair. Adrian chuckled. He only recently realized that when he gets up from an armchair or bed, he can no longer do it without some kind of audible groan. In his opinion, this is just a feature of middle age. As he approached the doorway and looked out through the screen, he thought he recognized two well-dressed young men standing nervously on the porch of his house. They were definitely not locals. Adrian pushed open the door, which was covered with lint and dust, to get a better look at them. Well, shit. I'll be damned. Adrian was shocked, to say the least. Brain, Whitney, what are you doing here? I'm Vicky. Whitney's not here. Really, why isn't she with you guys? Adrian mentally scolded himself for being sarcastic. Brian broke into the conversation before Vicky could formulate an answer. She is not with us. She left home shortly after her 16th birthday a few years ago, and since then no one has seen or heard from her. I think she just wanted to leave. Vicky's courage evaporated, and she turned to leave. By the way, Vicky, happy birthday, Adrian said longingly, looking at his daughter's back. Vicky, very surprised, froze and turned to her father with moist eyes. Thanks. I don't. So, I wasn't sure. Adrian opened the door wide. Why don't you come in? I suppose you have a reason to be here. I doubt you just happened to be nearby. Damn it, Adrian. Stop this bile. After all, they're just kids. Listen, I'm sorry. Please come in. It's just that when I saw you, I remembered a very unpleasant period in my life. I thought I had buried it all. Please? They entered his house cautiously. Both were shocked by how Spartan the setting was. Their father told them to sit on a clean but time-worn sofa that was older than both of them. Adrian, for his part, was too shocked to behave like a proper host. Brian and Vicky forgot about their well-rehearsed speeches, so for a few awkward minutes they just stared at each other. Adrian had already decided to let them start because he wasn't sure he could control the angry emotions bubbling inside him. "Listen, Dad." Brian spoke first. "Oh, so I'm a dad now? Damn it, Adrian. Leave it alone. I do not know what else to call you." Brian asked sincerely. "I'm sorry again. It's just that the last time we talked, you said you didn't want anything to do with me anymore. Do you know how much it hurt my soul? I had to fight your mother's false accusations to get a chance to be with you. Do you understand how awkward it was to try to establish a relationship with your own children when someone from child protection had to watch it? And I had to pay for the privilege of just seeing my own children. So to see you right here in front of me is a bit of a shock. How long has it been? More than 5 or 6 years. So forgive me if I get a little emotional. But you know what, Dad is fine. To tell you the truth, it sounds good. How can I help you guys? 2 things, I think. I mean it. Mom told us what happened, but we assumed there was more to it. By the way, how is your mother?" Adrian wasn't sure why he asked. Perhaps he hoped she was dead. She's fine." "Oh well, it's a pity. Besides, only good people die young." "And her boyfriend? You mean Houston?" "Well, they're still together, but I'm not sure how long. All they do is quarrel." "Oh, that would be a shame. But forgive my pettiness, I am sure you didn't drag yourself to this part of town to tell me about your mom's personal life." Adrian waited patiently for an answer, passively looking at both of them. "Well, Dad, we need your help with a few things." If it wasn't important, Adrian's solid facade began to crack. "You know I'll help you if I can. I've missed you guys. It's been a long time, and I've always hoped that. Well, I think that's what I mean." He paused, too breathless to continue. Vicky intervened in the conversation. A part of her was embarrassed by this man who was her father, but she was still seething with anger. "Why did you leave us? What have we done so wrong?" She started crying. "Abandoned you? I didn't leave you. I was forcibly cut out of your life. And I still remember the last time I saw all 3 of you kids. You told me you didn't want to see me anymore. I got very angry and swore to fulfill only my alimony obligations and then have nothing to do with you. Over time, I realized that your desire to remove me from your life was caused by the fact that your mother fulfilled her last promise to me. When she finally realized that I wasn't coming home, she promised to turn you all against me." All 3 of them were crying now. Their memories and regrets could be cut with a knife. "But, Dad, you've never tried to rebuild. Can you at least tell us what really happened?" "Damn, they're both adults, so why not?" "Well, in short, when your mom told me that I should share her with her lover, Houston Plano, I told her no. Then she started destroying my life in every possible way. She destroyed my soul." "No, Dad, it's not like that. Houston met her after you divorced her. At least that's what we were told. You can believe what you want, but I'm telling you the truth." Adrian spent the next hour telling Brian and Vicky exactly what had happened. Among other things, he said that at the most inopportune moment he was considering whether he should give up and return home or just commit suicide. "It seemed to me that I had lost everything that I considered important. I drove my brother's beat-up pickup truck to El Paso Point. As a teenager, I used to go there and sit on a ledge overlooking the valley below. When you're a teenager, you're too stupid to understand what's dangerous, so I never thought about the risk. I was wondering if teenagers from the city come there to have fun or, like me at the time, to reflect on their place in life. But I was going there for another purpose. Who cares about that? I couldn't think of a single person who missed me. In fact, even though it was based on a lie, maybe you kids will have a better chance of a normal life if I'm gone. All I had to do was step off the ledge and I would find peace." The more difficult choice was to fight back. But what was I fighting for? Everything I had was gone except the pain, and I was so tired of carrying it with me. My heart was still beating, but there was no life in it. There was no joy. My existence was just physical, which I thought would last until one day my heart mercifully stopped. Then I realized that there is a third option. All I had to do to end this nightmare that had become my existence was to return home. I could go home to Dallas and tell her she had one. Let him know that she forced me to comply and give in to her demands. At least then I'd have you guys. Vicky, horrified by what she had heard, intervened. But Daddy, that is, Dad. Daddy sounds even better than Daddy, honey. And Adrian smiled broadly. Was it really that bad? Would you at least have us? Honey, sometimes a person needs to stand on the edge of a precipice and look down into the abyss to understand what kind of person he really is. As I stood there, literally and figuratively, getting closer and closer to the edge, I found out who I really was. I retreated, and at that moment I vowed to fight for my life. Suddenly, being able to look at myself in the mirror every morning became the most important goal in my life. I realized that I was wrong. Someone will notice my absence, and it will be me I will notice. At that moment, I began my long journey back, and it was a very rewarding journey. I thought about everything I felt, went through, and overcame. Each of our experiences, both good and bad, prepares us for the next one. I got my last life lesson when I realized the absolute truth. I hope someday you children will understand it. Your mother may have wanted to ruin my life, but she could only do it if I let her. It seems so obvious that I do not know how I missed it. Remember, no matter what life throws at you, you are in complete control of what you will allow your life to turn into. I discovered that many of the things I treasured were just things that, in the end, didn't matter at all. Vicky wanted to interrupt him again, but Adrian raised his hand to stop her. But Vicky, honey, I didn't really lose you, did I? You were just confused for a while. At least, I hope so. His voice was choking with emotion. Oh, Daddy, I'm so sorry. I know, kid, but you don't have to do this. Adrian turned his attention to his son, just to give Vicky a chance to collect her thoughts. It is difficult for 18-year-olds to come to terms with the fact that their life was not what they imagined it to be. So, Brain, what did you say you needed second? You see, Dad, Vicky needs to go to college. She's a smart girl. She's always been smart, but she's never had grades 4. I mean, she needs to go to college. She's working and putting it off a bit, but she wants to get a degree in astrophysics. She wants to work at NASA. And well, Adrian looked at Vicky. She couldn't look him in the eye. The thought flashed through his mind that it was all about money, but he quickly dismissed it. There were too many emotions in the room for it to be just about money. We thought, please don't be angry. I mean, you're her father and all that? Yes? So what's the matter? There should be a lot of money in the college funds that were created during the divorce. Oh shit, are you saying there aren't any? Damn it. Dad, do we know anything about any college funds? Vicky was attentive, but even more confused than before. Adrian exhaled sadly. I hate to say this, guys, but as part of the divorce, I transferred my half share in the house to create a fund for each of you. Vicky was already sobbing hard, rocking back and forth and hugging herself tightly. The blows don't stop raining down on her. Poor girl. I know that they were created. I received confirmation through my lawyer. Well, Dad, they're not there right now. I conducted an asset search to find you. There is no money in the house, and Mom and Houston are constantly fighting over money. They have already overdue payments for the house. Vicky whispered through her tears. When I asked her, Mom said that you refused to pay for my college. That she tried to persuade you to pay more, but you refused. Okay. Listen, Vicky, please stop crying. Honey, we'll figure it out somehow. Well, not that it matters now, but what happened to the money I've been sending your mother all these years? Of course, it's not as much as it used to be, but alimony for you, Vicky, has been paid until today. And I guess your mother just forgot to tell me about Whit's disappearance when I kept sending her alimony? Where did all that money go? Believe it or not, Dad, Houston isn't really a bad guy. He's just, well, to be honest, both Mom and he look more like overgrown children than adults. A year after the divorce, they put a huge swimming pool in the backyard. They have parties more often than we ever have. And he has a lot of games and stuff. So, yes, I get it, Adrian said disgustedly. You'll have to forgive me if I disagree with your assessment of Houston's character, but none of this is going to help us right now, is it? A thought struck Adrian. What about you, Brain? Do you go to college? I'm fine, Dad. The government pays for my college. I'll owe them 6 years after graduation next year, but it's okay. I will be working in the U.S. Space Forces. He smiled wryly. I mean, everyone still calls me Brain. and he shrugged his shoulders slightly. Adrian was impressed and proud of his son. He was too depressed to say anything, but their eyes met and they both understood. How much money do you have, Vicky? Just a couple thousand, Dad. I'm just a waitress. Don't belittle yourself, honey. Waitressing is hard and decent work. Adrian realized that in a previous life he would have been ashamed if his daughter had worked as a waitress. Some of the best people I know make a living by serving tables. Others drive trucks. I'm proud of you and what you're trying to achieve. Adrian had his ex-wife to thank for that. If it wasn't for her selfishness, he would never have had the opportunity to develop the deep bond that now exists between the two brothers. Because of the age difference, they were never close while growing up. And when Adrian became interested in money and the acquisition of property, they became even more estranged from each other as adults. One of the many facts Adrian learned after swallowing his pride and sleeping on his brother's couch was that Garland was a better person than him. When a person loses everything, he has nothing to do. Therefore, you have a lot of time for introspection. However, Adrian had to admit that maybe he wouldn't have cared about his brother if their situations had been reversed. One evening, when he was at rock bottom, drinking too much and wallowing in his misery, he asked Garland and Killy through an alcoholic haze why they were helping him. They were both shocked by the question and answered together. Because you are a family. Garland looked genuinely offended. How could you even ask me that question, Adrian? From that moment on, he began to look at their world in a different way. What he saw deeply affected him. He realized that what he had once thought of as an ideal world was actually an illusion based on possessions rather than substance. Garland and Killy were much closer than he and Dallas had ever been. They shared all human experiences, no matter how simple they might seem. Their children had half as many possessions as his children, but they seemed happier and more satisfied. He once thought his world was perfect, but he never realized how shallow it was. He didn't remember who said it, but significant changes come only from despair suited his life perfectly. All those people in AI who smiled at him, laughed at his jokes, and nodded their heads at his every suggestion. They loved him only for what he could do for them. They all disappeared when he got into trouble. He and Garland became very close. When he had trouble finding a job, his brother took him into his company as a handyman. The many hours of travel allowed them to get even closer. They often stopped for lunch at Denny's restaurant, where Killy worked. It was there that he learned how hard she worked. When she returned home, Killy worked even harder. She never complained. One day he asked her why, and she replied that she had a wonderful life. What could she complain about? Adrian realized that being a simple person does not mean being a simpleton. Ordinary people were more direct, appreciated, and expected honesty, and helped others even when they didn't need it. When Adrian was finally able to get a job, he was paid more than he earned unloading trucks, but less than half of what he received at AI. Adrian enjoyed working with Garland so much that he almost turned it down. If it wasn't for Garland, he would have done so. Don't be an idiot, Adrian. First of all, you're not doing so well. Secondly, you can't live on our couch forever. Look, we'll have to buy a new one as soon as you leave. Thirdly, and most importantly, you will need your own place when your children return to you. And I promise you that one day they will come back. The day Adrian moved into the rented cottage, he bought Killy and Garland a new couch-a sofa with a sleeping place, just in case. Adrian's thoughts returned to the present. When the children come back to me. Okay, Vicky, here's what we're going to do. You're moving in with me, rent-free. Of course, you'll have to help with the housework to keep the house in order. And I'm sure it won't be what you expected, but we need to register you at a public university. It's cheaper, but I can't afford more. I believe that with your work, applications for grants and scholarships, as well as with my help, we can help you. I don't earn that much, but now that all alimony and child support are over, I should have a few extra dollars. This will give us some time, and after receiving your bachelor's degree, we will be able to get you into a good master's or doctoral program. But the main thing is that you don't lose your grades. You and I will work on this together. Dad, I can't help it. Be quiet. It's all settled. Yes, sir. Brain, you can sleep on the couch if you want. No, I'm fine. I have a dorm. Good. And one more thing. I hope your mom doesn't know where I live. They both shook their heads vigorously. Good. Let it be so. Now, how soon can you move Vicky here? The three of them stood up and hugged each other. They smiled warmly and knew that everything would work out. The epilogue. Brian and Vicky's relationship with their mother deteriorated sharply and quickly. After they confronted Dallas, learning about the inconsistency of the story she told about the divorce, the situation quickly escalated. Vicky, first of all, why do you prefer to believe your father's lies rather than me? After all, he abandoned us. Why don't you show up at home? Vicky patiently answered, ignoring the growing anger. Mom, what happened to my college fund? Well, with the one that was created from Dad's capital for the house? There was dead silence on the other end of the phone conversation with Dallas. It was obvious that she was making up a lie, so Vicky continued. Is it strange that I'm looking at a piece of paper from Merrill Edge with my name as a beneficiary, and there's a zero balance on it? Goodbye, Mom. If I never talk to you again, it will be too soon. From that day on, Brian never spoke to his mother again. After graduating from college, he was assigned to the Vandenberg Space Force Base, located on the other side of the country, in California. In fact, he hadn't seen his mother in person since the day he was reunited with his father. Adrian told him that Dallas would be attending Vicky's upcoming wedding because he didn't want him to be shocked or make a scene. Listen, Brain, this will be the first time we will all be together. Yes, Dad, except for Whitney. There was a note of melancholy in his voice. His missing sister still saddened him all these years later. You're right, of course, except Whitney. Adrian couldn't say anything else about it. But, nevertheless, you understand what I'm talking about. I think it's high time for you and Vic to restore at least a minimal relationship with your mother. Yes, and what about you, Dad? Shouldn't I? No, and it's not the same thing. She'll always be your mother, and I'm just her ex-husband. However, if I ever see her, I can be polite. That's all I ask of you too. As her wedding day approached, one night before going to bed, Adrian sat Vicky down next to him. Vicky was still living with him. Since she was in her last semester before getting her master's degree, she saw no reason to move out before the wedding. She and her fiancé have already rented an apartment for a short time. Vicky had recently applied for a job at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory at the California Institute of Technology in Pasadena, California, and they didn't want to be tied to a place. But, Dad, the wedding is in 5 days. What do you mean you have to leave? Just for a couple of days, honey. Anyway, everything has already been decided with the wedding. But I need you here. What if? Relax, Vic. Okay, I'll tell you the truth. Your wedding present was supposed to be delivered the day after tomorrow, but something got mixed up with the delivery. Anyway, I need to fly west to pick him up. The Brain will come back with me on Wednesday evening. So just relax, okay? Dad, your gift to me is that you let me back into your life. I don't need anything else. Vicky wasn't happy, but she understood. She had always been Daddy's daughter when she was very young, and she became one again when she moved in with him. She also became one of the neighborhood ladies who constantly pestered Adrian with requests to find someone, as they always put it. At least once a week, he patiently explained to the group the difference between loneliness and loneliness. Besides, ladies, I have a couple of women from work with whom I do something. And he winked at them. Then he would start hugging and tickling them all while they chirped over him. I don't need anyone else to take care of me when you're all doing your best to feed me. This exchange usually ended when the husband or several husbands of the ladies shouted at Adrian to stop fooling around and return to the living room because the game was starting. True to his word, Adrian returned a couple of days later, and Brian was with him. All three stayed at the cottage and had a great time. Both Brian and Vicky were thrilled with the possibility that they would soon be living just 150 miles apart. Finally, the wedding day arrived. It was a small, economical event that Vicky and the neighborhood ladies had planned flawlessly. Somehow, Dallas found out about Vicky's upcoming wedding at an early stage of planning and wanted to take part in it. She was immediately rejected by the ladies, even before Vicky had time to say no. All 8 women considered themselves to be Vicky's mothers, and after hearing the story from Vicky, they had no desire to communicate with Dallas. It turned out to be a beautiful day, and about 50 guests sat patiently waiting for the arrival of the bride, along with her groom and his best men. Brian looked a little out of place as one of Vicky's 9 bridesmaids, standing in his class a uniform next to the ladies next door. Adrian teased him that the uniform looked like he'd stolen it from an old Star Trek costume shop. Just as Vicky came out of the bride's room at the church to take her father's arm and ask him to walk her down the aisle and into her future life, Adrian said, "Wait a minute, I forgot your present." He disappeared for a moment. "Dad, come back, what the? Oh, my God." When Adrian returned, he had her sister Whitney on his other arm. "I thought we should both walk you down the aisle." He smiled as widely as he had ever smiled before. "Do you mind?" The wedding was delayed for about 30 minutes. It took Vicky and Whitney a while to let go of each other. Then Vicky had to quickly fix her makeup. But in the end, all three made it to the altar. Of course, there was another small delay for Brian's reunion with Whitney. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Just before the pastor began to read, a loud plaintive howl came from the back of the small church. None of the wedding participants even turned to look. They knew who she was and why she was so sad. The ceremony continued without interruption after one of the groom's family members escorted Dallas out of the church. Everyone seemed to be enjoying the reception. Adrian chuckled to himself. He thought that Vicky's husband, Anthony, must be a very understanding person because Vicky spent more time with her sister at the reception than with him. Whitney had to forcibly pull away from her sister so that Vicky and Anthony could dance their first dance together. The wedding was an amazing and at the same time exhausting event for Adrian. After making sure that all the guests were seated and enjoying their rest, he took a drink from the bar and went to the patio to find a quiet place to think. Not so many years ago, he thought that his life was over, but now it has never been so intense. He was a grateful and very satisfied man. "Hi, Adrian." The terrible sound of a needle scratching the surface of a vinyl disc, which he had not heard since childhood, echoed shrilly in Adrian's head. He was so startled by his Pavlovian reaction to her voice that Adrian almost dropped his drink. Intellectually, he knew that this would happen today, but for some reason he hoped that it would not happen. "Dallas." He stood up and, without ceremony, pulled out a chair for Dallas. He asked her to sit down like a gentleman, but he remained standing. Previous years have not been kind to Dallas. She was rapidly gaining weight. Her once petite but figure skater body has turned into a pear. Her once beautiful blonde hair has become thin and unruly, and there is a lot of gray in it. It immediately struck Adrian that her habit of always taking good care of herself had long since disappeared. Her matronly dress made her look even more despondent. "Where are you? How did you find Whitney?" Adrian wanted to lash out at her, but held his tongue. "It's a long story, but suffice to say it wasn't easy. After I found her, and at no great cost, I thought I had arranged everything over the phone so that she would attend her sister's wedding. But at the last minute, she couldn't bring herself to be present. She said that it would be too traumatic and could negate all her efforts to overcome the problems associated with childhood. So I had to fly to Oregon to meet her in person and convince her to come. And I had to hide what I was doing from both the brain and Vicky because I wasn't sure I could persuade her to come back. By the way, you have a lot to answer for in front of her, even more than for your other two children. I know you're not with Houston anymore, but if you see him, tell him that, if I'm not mistaken, the problems Whitney faced don't have a statute of limitations. She's still trying to figure out your role in all this." Dallas decided it was better to change the subject. "Thanks for the invitation. I know that everything happened because of you. When I thanked Vicky for the invitation, she said it was your idea. She said that if it were up to her, I wouldn't be here." And she started crying. "Why did you invite me, Adrian?" She struggled. "I didn't do it for you, Dallas. I did it for our children. They need to communicate with their mother, if only so that they can let go of the past. As for me, well, I don't mean to sound cruel, no matter how it sounds, but if I never see you again, that's fine with me." Dallas stifled another sob. Adrian softened his tone a little. "Don't get me wrong, if our paths cross in the future, I will be cordial. I won't even avoid you. It's just that I perceive you as another person whose life once crossed mine a long time ago. I did not prosecute you for the money that you and your friend stole from your children because it would drag you back into my life. I didn't want to waste my precious time and energy on this negativity. I would like to get an answer to one question that has been bothering me all these years. Have you always been an immature, self-centered narcissist, and I was just blinded by my love for you?" Or did something happen after our wedding that made you become like this? I understand your anger at me, Adrian, but does it really matter now? I don't think that's true, but yes, it matters to me. Very big, for that matter. He was surprised at how calm he was. I mean, you deliberately decided to ruin my life. I would like to at least know why. For God's sake, one minute I had what I thought was the perfect wife, and the next, my world collapsed. This just doesn't happen. Believe it or not, Adrian, I didn't set out to destroy you. And no, nothing happened. I really haven't been happy for a long time. At some point, I realized that my entire existence boils down to supporting other people's goals. I wasn't there, and I wanted something more in my life. What happened to Houston happened by itself. I met him at the gym. He was cheerful and carefree. He flattered me to the point where I felt like I was back in school. After we started, we've become close. That's when I got stupid. I don't know why, but for some reason it seemed to me that you wouldn't mind so much if nothing changed in your world. I've decided that your image is more important than your ego. When I told you about this, I thought you'd be mad, but I thought we could talk about it. When you reacted like that, I probably just snapped and turned into an angry bitch. When I realized that everything was over between us, I probably just decided to make you unhappy and worry about my own happiness. Adrian just shook his head. He knew she hadn't answered his question honestly. Over time, people tend to rationalize their bad behavior in order to live with what they've done. Maybe she really believed in the nonsense she was selling. If not, then, like most people, she couldn't lie to herself anymore and still consider herself a good person. But Dallas's tears of regret were sincere and flowed freely. She cried without hesitation. It took several minutes before she calmed down enough to speak. I'm sorry I ruined your life, Adrian. I was such a fool. You didn't ruin my life, Dallas. You saved it. He paused for a moment to collect his thoughts, and then continued. It was unforgivable to turn my children against me. But everything else that you took away from me turned out to be unnecessary. Did you know that the job I've been in for longer than Arlington Industries still earns me only half of what I used to earn? And yet I feel richer than ever. Now I spend money on important things, not on designer suits, fancy cars, exorbitant vacations, and so on. To be honest, I like the person I am now much more than the one I was before. Adrian couldn't help himself. Do you remember what you said to me then, Dallas? No? I said that at least I have self-respect, and you replied that you have everything else. So, I still have self-respect and much more. And what do you have left? Adrian turned and walked away.